Welcome to Economics Happy Hour. My name's Matt.
And I'm Jadrian.
And we are thrilled to be back in, I guess we would call it the studio. Unlike being live, although our live ones were fun. I hope everybody enjoyed those. But we are back to normal. This is going to likely be released in October, but it's still somewhat early in our semester. So how is life back on the Virginia Tech campus?
So I think when we met last time, we were in Cincinnati, gearing up for the semester. So I think both of us were. I'm going to speak for you. I don't know. I assume that we were both very nervous and anxious, and usually the weeks leading up to the semester are stressful. Which I'm actually glad we recorded a few of them during Jet Set because it kind of helped me settle into the semester, and so I'm feeling much better now. So it's much easier to have this conversation than if we were actually trying to do them in order. I think it'd be a lot harder.
Do it initially. Yeah. I was really busy as I was recording last. I was teaching again for the first time in the fall for a few years. And because I started doing videos, I realized, let me release videos as I'm doing the class. And I did a whole lot of them in August. I've still got some more, but the goal was to get as much as I could get done ahead of time. For the class and record those. But semester's been good here so far. It's been fantastic. It's so much fun to be back in the classroom. And this is the first full class I normally teach that's been normal since spring of 2019.
Ooh. So are you teaching game theory or principles?
I'm teaching game theory. I taught it spring of 19. I taught it fall of 2020. Of course, that was total chaos. I mean, it was fun, but much more stressful as teaching it. We were in person and then also had to relay it for those who were doing it remotely at the same time, and masks on and all of the stuff.
Oh, so you were probably okay. So this is very different than the Penn State version because, like, for the Penn State version, all the classes are so big that pretty much every class was online. Like they said some things were this hybrid set, but like it was really only classes that had like 10 or 12 students. I mean, if you had any sort of sizable class of more than 20, you were online. So were you doing the whole like 15 students where 7 people are in a room that hold 50 and then 7 are online? Like was it that sort of setup?
No, our public safety basically said it could be a 40% capacity. I had a room that would normally hold 50 and capacity was 20, and I think there weren't quite 20 in there.
Okay.
And then I think it might have been 14 total, but then 2 or 3 of them were taking it remotely. So they had to be Zoomed at the same time. And
man, that was a lot of work.
It's more stressful. I think I could do a reasonably good online class. I think I can do, and I will not sound humble here, but I think I can do an exceptional in-person class.
Yes.
I mean, it's our craft, and I mean, we care about this. We are the people. We go to conferences. We study the best methods. I'm not going to like tone things down. I think, and in a small class setting, when I'm in person, I believe I'm an exceptional teacher.
Yes.
Teaching it in person, but then also having the camera on you to go remote was so stressful. And it's just, it's that extra thing you're thinking about. Normally, I won't say I'm on autopilot by any means, but when you've done things a few times, you don't have to think about how do I engage everybody in the class. I kind of know how to do it. You always had to think, oh, am I engaging the online people enough? What about the in-class? What's the mix? Do they hear me? Is the mic working? All that. It was stressful, but it was, we did what we had to do. And you were remote in 2020.
So we were 2020 to 2021, that first year, I was fully remote. I say most of Penn State was fully remote, which was actually not that bad, right? I think same thing. I think I'm a very good teacher in person. I think I'm captivating. Doing it fully remote, I could channel all of my energy into this sort of online delivery. So I did mine as like webinars. So it was more like you were kind of logging into a live stream of me teaching. But I think it was really engaging. My worst semester I've ever had teaching was fall 2021, where it was the hybrid version. But we were doing this weird sort of 80% capacity, but like for those of you who don't, so some people know this from listening, some people don't. I teach classes at the time I had 700 students, so it was one of those like 500 people could enroll in the course, but I had to offer both in person and online, and so you're getting these weird 700 person rooms with 200 people in it.
Yeah.
So imagine a movie theater I'm very not even a movie theater. That's actually I mean bigger, right? Like imagine a
Yeah.
small musical theater.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
actually, 700 is,
yeah,
there are many Broadway houses that are like 500 or 600 or
right.
so.
So it was right, like you said, it's hard to get those. Like are the 200 people online? Can they hear me? Is the microphone
Yeah.
working? Is it recording? What's the lag? And I had so many issues because it was just it's really hard to do both. It's hard to make sure the people in class are kind of engaged, especially when it's 200 people in a 700-person room. Struggled.
Yeah.
I struggled so bad.
Yeah, yeah, that was stressful. And I guess we're talking about struggles and we're not having a beer yet. So like we've overlooked something.
Well, I
So
guess this actually, this works actually with our topic for today too. So I think this came up during the pandemic. So I think we had a nice tie-in without realizing it.
yeah, yeah.
So what are you
I
drinking,
can
Matt?
I will in honor I might have had this on before, I can't remember, but in honor of your home state.
Oh, that one's so good. That
Uh
is that is one of my favorite Shiner varieties.
so for those listening, which the vast majority are listening, it's a Shiner sea salt and lime. It's it's a good beer. There's trivia tonight, so I will probably have another beer at trivia. So I wanted not an IPA
Yeah.
earlier. This is a low
No, that
alcohol.
is.
Yeah.
I struggled to find that one in stores because I think they sell them up in the Selinsgrove area,
They
but
do.
they didn't have that variety down in State College. So I remember there was once I think I was driving like Williamsport, and I like pulled over at a gas station. I just happened to see it, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh my god, I've got to get this.
Well, next time I
That is,
visit,
you got a
I'll
good one.
actually next time will be the first time, but next time I visit, I'll bring some down. So
Thank you, I appreciate it.
and I am drinking. Our family went to Hard Rock Cafe in New Orleans, so I have a mug this time. So.
Nice. I am drinking a repeat, which means I'm gonna need your help saying this again. So we are recording this early September. So I'm still kind of
Narragansett.
it's Narragansett, yeah. It's early September, which means it's still summer. It's still hot enough to be summer. So I am drinking the Narragansett Shandy beer, mostly because I got to clean out the fridge. So we're working through some of the back of the fridge beers.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know the struggle is real, right? These are first world problems, as you would say.
Well, we're both similar, right? You have the salt and lime. We both have this sort of lemon
Yeah.
lime mixed together. I'm going with my VT Science silicone mug. Is what I picked
That's
out of
cool.
the cabinet. Cheers, Matt.
Cheers. So speaking of struggles, right? I mean, Jadrian's struggling. We've got to figure out cleaning the beer out of the fridge. Almost the same level as our topic today. Well, it's not. I mean, it's designed to address the struggle. And in a previous episode, we talked about school vouchers, where I had thought a lot more about it, and I had taught school vouchers. And you had some thoughts on it, but kind of more newly formed.
Yep.
We're going to flip it a little bit, not 100% flip, to talk about something you have taught in class, and I followed, but I have not taught this. And that is universal basic income.
Yes.
So I'll let you go ahead and with the definition first, Jadrian. How would we define universal basic income?
So and this is, I think I like that we're starting with the definition, because I think what we'll talk about throughout this portion is like, if we don't agree on universal basic income, what are some other things we could do? And then as soon as you change it, it's not universal basic income. So generally, universal basic income, UBI, is some sort of program where citizens of an area, so you can have UBI at a state, federal, regional level, but citizens of an area would receive a flat payment over some period of time, typically a month, sort of no strings attached. So it would be considered an entitlement program. You are entitled to that item. It's not generally not a welfare program. So there's not kind of in its truest form, there's no sort of income limit. So probably the most popular one in the United States that was pitched, maybe, it's been a while, maybe 2016 presidential sort of debate.
I think it was 2020 with
was it 2020?
It's with Pete
Yang.
Buttigieg.
No, I was thinking of Yang. Actually, if you go one back.
Oh yeah. No, you're right. I'm completely wrong on that. Yeah.
But I think that was sort of he's not the first politician. So, there's some other supporters of it or so like versions of it. But I think he kind of really popularized it, at least in the primary portion. So his idea was basically every U.S. citizen would get $2,000 per month, regardless of whether you're working or not. It doesn't matter. Every single person gets $2,000. That would be a universal basic income.
Yep. Yeah, that's the extent that I know on that. The essentially, I mean, I followed it a bit. So when you're teaching it, what
Mhm.
elements are you talking about when you're talking to classes about?
Yeah, so I teach it in my labor course. So I don't teach it in principles. So I taught a labor economics course for 10 years at Penn State. And one of the big things I did sort of, it was pre-pandemic. I kind of flipped it and just said that like every week we would sort of talk about some sort of topic that I think students really wanted to know about. So it was things like we would have a topic or a week on automation, we'd have a week on minimum wage, we'd have a week on government programs. And so that's where I taught it in the labor course. Was I sort of introduced this idea of what are entitlement programs, what are welfare programs, sort of how do those work around labor, and then sort of towards the end, it's always kind of pitched as the, well, what's the next level, or what are people talking about in this sort of welfare entitlement space? So that's where I was always kind of talking about it with at least labor economics class and almost all economics majors. And so it was a little easier to have a conversation about it.
No, yeah, and the issue, there was one pitched in the presidential campaign, and then there have been some pilots of this.
Yeah.
A couple initial ones looked okay. More of the recent evidence that I've just seen scattered headlines of, and admittedly probably haven't done a deep dive into the research, seems a little bit more questions on the effectiveness.
Yeah,
But
part of the problem is there's no big study of it. There's little city. No, I shouldn't say little cities. I mean, they're major cities, but and it's not like New York City's doing it. So there's like cities in California or in Canada, and like there's these cities that'll do it, but they'll give 1,000 people. They'll do a universal basic income, but you're talking about 1,000 people out of millions of people. So the effect size is generally really small. So the questionable side of things is basically just this idea that it doesn't really change working conditions. People are still going to work or not work. They're still going to do what they were doing before. Most of it, I think, most of the change really has been on sort of mental health issues. Is just the comfort that it provides people in just a stressful situation if it's somebody who needs it. I think that's the other big part about most of the pilot programs. They're not universal in the sense that like everyone gets it. They're more like welfare programs. You have to qualify to be in the sample. So you had to have some sort of income threshold. And so that's where I think, we were talking about it a little bit beforehand. That's where it gets deviated from universal basic income. Like, would it work? We don't know, because all the pilot programs aren't universal, and they tend to be more like welfare programs rather than entitlement programs.
Yep. Yeah, and so Andrew Yang probably popularized, and I just quick looked it up. So he actually proposed it was $1,000 a month.
Okay.
On UBI that's proposed. The studies I've seen, the headlines, the initial one seemed it didn't do much to displace work, which is most common. The more recent ones I've seen seem to say that, but this is not me collecting them. But yeah, the mental health, I mean, there should be less stress. So
and I think that's part of this is where you and I have talked about our privilege some in the past, where I don't know what it's like to not be able to pay a bill. I in grad school I did, but like I had parents who were able to support me when things were getting a little tight. The stress of budgeting and needing to budget is I think that's what I've heard, at least in this kind of literature space, is that the mental stress associated with budgeting, needing to go to meetings for things like if you are on welfare or on TAMP for food stamps or any of the other programs, right? Those kind of constant meetings, plus you're likely working an hourly job that doesn't have consistent schedules. I like that sort of just the psychic cost of living in poverty. We don't understand that today. There might have been moments in our past that we did, but I don't understand what that's like today. And so I think that's, especially the mental health side, I think that's been kind of one of the biggest, that just kind of helps smooth out income for people.
Yeah. So what are you sound pretty positive about UBI.
So I'm positive in this. So that's this, because I think so. Matt and I sometimes we chat a little bit before we start hitting record, but we don't chat days before. I'm positive on UBI. I would say I'm pro universal basic income, and I'm gonna put a caveat on here for anyone who's thinks that I'm ready to just start spending trillions of dollars. I think the adjustments that I would make would not make it a UBI is the problem. Right? It's like I would start putting caveats on it. I think there are, yeah, I think we've talked a little bit about this like in the taxes section. It would be really nice to take sort of all the different funding programs, things like TAMP, housing vouchers, child support, food stamps, and instead of just making somebody go to 6 different meetings to make sure you qualify, man, would it be easier just to give them like one lump check and say, here, here's the payment you would have gotten. So I think about like sort of the inefficiencies of running a lot of programs. That's where I'm kind of pro UBI is like, I can see how that would cut out a lot of the inefficiencies in that space, but I don't think I deserve it, right? I don't think I deserve $1,000 a month just because I'm a citizen of the United States. So like, I would propose higher taxes on people who receive it but have some sort of income level, and then now it's not universal.
Yeah.
Now it's a welfare program.
Yeah. So, my take on my general thought on this, without studied it a bit, is I love the idea in theory, but I don't think it will ever work in practice. It is precisely what you mentioned. I despise the idea that it's 40 different programs. And I think that right now that we have 40 different programs that are, welfare programs that people can, and it actually gives perverse incentives because all of these different programs might have different threshold levels. So we had an economist from the University of Georgia on campus about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, Jeffrey Dorfman, and he presented on that you could have a single, it was a single mother who was working. If she was making under $31,000 a year, there was this level of benefits that was coming in. But once she crossed 31,000, her income dropped. Her overall, the total amount coming in between income and government benefits dropped. And she would not get back to the same level until making over $70,000 a year. And that's a horrible, horrible incentive in terms of working hard, because there are plenty of jobs that can pay 80, 90, 100, 110,000 a year or more that people could try to get to. The way you get to those, of course, is you first start working at the one that's 35 and 40 and 50 and 60 and 70. But there's zero incentives to do that. And it's essentially holding people back. I would love a UBI if it replaced everything else.
Right, but then this goes back to what I was saying, right? But then it's not a universal basic income. We basically have another welfare program, right? Where it's, there's some sort of income threshold that you only get it under certain amounts. And I think that takes away the universal part of universal basic income.
Yeah.
We basically have a basic income program.
Yeah, I'd be okay with a universal basic, but you're getting rid of all the other stuff. And it's just saying, okay, here's, this isn't much, but hey, everybody, it's 12,000 per individual. You can figure out, you're able to, hey, we're not saying you're living the high life, but you're going to be able to find a place to put something. You'll be able to have clothes, food, and have some place to have some shelter. And it's not much, but you'll always be able to live. But then taking all the other stuff away.
Have you read the book Financial Diaries by I want to say it's Jonathan Murdoch?
I don't believe I have.
Oh my God, it's fascinating. So this is actually exactly what you just said, this idea, right? Like you will have that there's income coming every month. So Financial Diaries, I assigned it as a reading actually to my labor course before I switched to this topics method. It's a program that he worked with and other people of just like getting people to record their income and what they're spending money on, how much money is coming in. So it's this sort of incomes, earnings, savings, all that sort of stuff. And then they link it up with things like financial records from JP Morgan, stuff like that. And I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I didn't fully appreciate how much people's income fluctuates month to month. Even if you have sort of a steady job, you might, like, we're very lucky that we have salary. So I know every 2 weeks, my paycheck's gonna be the exact same every single time.
Sure.
But even people who are working sort of hourly jobs that are full-time, you might be working hourly full-time, but some weeks you work 45, some weeks you're working 38, like you're averaging full-time. and he sort of shows this like this just up and down stuff of people's income, and sort of talks about these dips and peaks. I think is what he calls them
Sure.
in the book. And I just never, right? You never sort of process this, and he talks about one of the really popular. I guess we can throw in another econ term. Is consumption smoothing. What's the income? There's actually a phrase for it. Something
Um,
hypothesis.
yeah, what lifetime income
Come hypothesis or something.
hypothesis?
Where this is
Um, I
again,
consumption smoothing is pretty good though.
Matt and I are not macroeconomists. So
No.
if you are a macroeconomist, we apologize for us trying to talk about this. But one of the things he talks about in that section is essentially this idea that like we teach students, you make money, save when you make a lot, spend when you don't have as much. And the idea is you consume, you spread out your consumption. And what Murdoch talks about in the book was really interesting is that is a very privileged way to look at income and savings, is that we assume that they have income to save, and that whenever they have income that they're not spending it on something else that they need, some sort of doctor's visit, or maybe the car needs new tires and we happen to have income, so we actually are going to spend it now while we have it. And so it was sort of fascinating. And I think you sort of mentioned in that comment, that I would say that pro comment about UBI, is that it at least guarantees you have some consistent consumption level,
Yeah.
that you will be able to buy groceries regularly, and that you still are going to need probably more to cover rent and healthcare and things like that.
Yeah. So I mean, it's one that I think I in theory I love it. In practice,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's another program that would be tacked on. I can't fathom that we're going to be getting rid of all of the other programs that there
Yeah.
are, but it would be so much more efficient for
Mm-hmm.
society, and it really trusts people a lot more
Yeah.
to give funding instead of giving, oh, here's your energy assistance and
Here's your housing. Here's your housing.
here's your the food stamps or
Well, so I'm actually glad you said it in terms of a trust and freedom part. So I present this. This is one of my. I have a panel of 3 people that I say, who are supporters of universal basic income, and I put up these 3 people's faces, and I say, you would normally not have these 3 people on a slide together in some sort of different ways. And so actually, there's 4, but I put the 4th person before. So the first person, there's a cool quote from Thomas Paine on redistribution. So it's not his common sense one; it's the one before from his agrarian justice.
Yeah.
And it basically says, if you think back to those of you listening, right, think back to farmers of the colonial times. His argument was basically, the government gave out all this land to people, but kind of roundabout way, a farmer puts work in and then takes away from the land, but that land didn't actually belong to someone. Like, it's sort of the kind of a roundabout way of saying, like, somewhere somebody was handed something and then was able to profit off of that through their hard work and entrepreneurship and innovation and things like that. And so one of the arguments he kind of proposes is that a part of that, not all of it, but a part of it should also be given collectively, because we're all on this earth together. So he's got a cool quote that kind of goes along with it. But the other 3, Martin Luther King Jr., Richard Nixon, and Hayek are the 3 faces that I have up there.
Yeah.
That are sort of, I think Nixon was part of the negative income or negative tax.
Well, I know Milton Friedman was big on like negative income tax,
which is sort of in that
program.
Space.
Yeah. So it's, and I think you could be like, I'm pretty libertarian. I think it's much more libertarian, like to do it this way. Then, I mean, you could argue over how big it should be,
right,
and how much. I mean, my default would be, boy, I mean, we want to make it low enough where, okay, you can eat, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's got to be pretty low, but be more efficient. It's more trusting. It's more, and it reduces you could probably get rid of 100 government agencies at once, right? Like, it makes a heart sing. Anyway.
So there was an MBER article on it. So this is a couple of years old now. So my guess is, I'll tell you the numbers from that article. And then I haven't looked at the updated one, just I haven't taught labor in a while. But they basically said, if you were to give only to, and this would be another one of those caveats, if you only give it to working age adults, there's a little over 200 million working age adults. If you gave everybody about $12,000 a year, it would cost $2.61 trillion in terms of the deficit. And so if you offset the welfare programs, that saves you about $1 trillion a year. So you're still adding some to the debt, but then it goes back to well, who gets it, right? Is it a household? Is it an individual? Is it working age? Is it, right? Do we include somebody who's 17 because they may be living on their own? So like, I think you get into these sort of really interesting political arguments. And I think I'll say we've seen some of it when we think about things like even during the pandemic, right? There was the childcare credits that, if you had a kid, you got some money. There was obviously the payments that a lot of people got under certain levels. Like we've seen it in some parts. And I remember this being a big debate during like when those stimulus checks came out, because if I remember correctly, correct me, you probably know this better than I do. There was some of them, if you were a dependent, you didn't get them. Maybe it was like the first one.
I'm not 100% on that, but I think you're correct. I don't think I had an 18-year-old in the house. I don't think he got a check.
Did he get any? So there was 3 of them, right?
I don't think he got any. I'm not 100%.
Yeah. So this was one of the big, I remember this being an issue because I remember my students being really mad about it. And we had this conversation in class, and I said, look, if you really wanted to stimulate the economy, if that is actually your goal, should you give it to an 18-year-old or should you give it to Dean Rosu, who is going to actually stimulate the economy with $1,000? I have a feeling that your 18-year-old child would save very little of that $1,000. You might plop some of it into a savings account. You probably gamble with it.
Yeah. I don't know. It might be we might not be representative agents of our age, but some of the spending that happened in COVID is part of what makes me hesitant. Is we saw the labor force participation rate drop dramatically. Now, some of this was people were out of work and then made a decision, but I think some of the initial, there was a lot of funding given out, increased unemployment benefits and just cash handed out. That's the part that makes me.
Well, but this is the thing, right? If you're only getting $1,000 a month, you're barely paying rent at $1,000 a month in most places. Maybe some really small areas you might be able to get an apartment for $800, $900, right? Like people aren't quitting over $1,000 a month, but if you think about it from an hourly standpoint, you're not needing to work as many hours.
If you had, but if you have 2 people together though, 24,000. It's.
But then it turns into, should it be per household or per person? Right? Does a 17-year-old does a dependent get it? Right? If you have a college student living in your house, do you get 3 payments? This is where it's fascinating. And I think this goes back to I think we've said this in a previous episode. A lot of times economists don't have good answers. We can talk about pros and cons of both sides, but we can't sit up here and go this is the better option.
Yeah. And those,
so I don't know.
And those don't get you the quotes as much either, right? Like the person who's very confident is always going to will get in the media quite a bit more.
So let me give you the pros and cons. I'll at least present pros and cons because I think we did this with school vouchers. So I'll give you the ones that are on this part. So pros, there's an argument that you've kind of mentioned already. Universal basic income would provide a certain standard of living, particularly as automation and I think really now artificial intelligence stuff, as that sort of grows, it provides this sort of nice standard of living that if you do lose your job because of some reason, it's kind of there as a baseline. We talked about it kind of on the opening part of it, is that generally most UBI programs show some sort of mental health gains, happiness gains, sort of less stress, which we would think hypothetically, right, would improve, would pass down, sprinkle down to kids being better fed, maybe probably working more under that scenario. So those are generally the 2. Those are really the only 2 pros that are ever really pitched. Is a standard of living and happiness. There's some arguments for fairness, right? Maybe it's you could tax some at the top to bring it down, but
if you do it right, it should be more efficient, and we should have fewer people who need to oversee the program, which hopefully means those individuals who are pretty bright and talented are using their talents in other ways to help society.
Yep. Instead of waiting to fill out forms to get another another program, they can go just do something.
Yeah.
The cons of it are often the cost. I mean, I think the biggest one is going to be the cost, and I think as soon as you start chipping away at that, it's not universal anymore. But then there's arguments against it because of sort of the value of work, right? You presented this actually as that a universal basic income would, open people up to go do work. There is another side that basically says this devalues work. That you're getting a handout, so now there's not this sort of inherent joy or purpose in working because somebody will just go make their UBI and that's it. And then there's a third portion, which I don't love it as a con, but I've seen it listed a few times, and it's sort of a conspiracy theory answer. The argument is basically that it's a bait and switch by capitalists, that it is just a method of essentially guaranteeing that everybody has a set amount of income that that they'll be able to pay and continue to consume. It's sort of a consumerism type idea that it's not actually helping anybody. It's just that money is funneling back into businesses anyway.
Okay.
I think it's a little on the list. I put it as third on that one, but yeah, I would say those are generally the cons of it.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's it seems good pro and con balance on this. So before anything else on UBI before we get to pop culture, which we had mentioned ahead of time could be a real struggle for us to figure out related to this.
I'm gonna steal the book as my pop culture since I thought about it right in the middle.
Go ahead. That gives me more time.
Well, so I'd say there's some, I don't know if this is pop culture or not. There's some fun examples of UBI happening. I think every couple months, I think there's some city or country that does it. But there are popular examples. So the Alaska Permanent Fund is sort of a fun example. So if you're a resident of Alaska, the state's oil revenues get redistributed back to people who live in Alaska. It's super small. It's, I think I have my little chart. This data only goes from 2016, so you can tell how old this is. At least up until 2016, the largest payout was like $2,000 for the year. So it's super, super small. There is a story about a village in Kenya that got universal basic income. I think some big funder was basically giving out $22 a month is how much they were giving each of the people there. It was a 12-year program, but again, it's relative. I don't want to say. I mean, it's large to them, but small to us. It was basically enough, sort of like you were saying. It hits basic necessities, so they were able to pay for school supplies, for books for their kids, sort of that kind of base level stuff. And then there's just a bunch of stuff around other cities and stuff. But those are the two that are sort of the fun ones to talk about.
Yeah. I don't have. I mean, it's tough. I was trying to think through. Are there? Can I find a song? Can I find a movie clip that exactly hits? I mean, hitting universal basic income is a little bit difficult. I'll mention, and I don't know that I have a song for it because the new soundtrack's not out, but the musical Here Lies Love is out on Broadway. It's a fantastic show if you're in the New York area, and it wasn't selling too well, so you can also get cheap tickets. We literally showed up at 6:00 to the theater itself, myself and my daughter, and asked for rush tickets if they had any. I don't know do you know what a rush ticket is?
No.
So theaters will put some day of tickets for, it'll depend on the theater, but $30, $35, or $40 usually that they'll sell. If the show is selling good, it'll often be partial view. If it's not selling good, it'll often be better. You show up, you ask for rush tickets. If they have them, you get a ticket, $35, and these aren't bad seats. Often, for when the shows are reasonably doing well, the box office opens at 10, and you have to line up ahead of time. So I've done this where my wife and I have done this many years ago, where we would get there an hour early and.
I think I've done this. This sounds familiar. I just didn't know they were called rush tickets.
Yeah, yep. So we several times. One time with my kids, we went at 6 a.m. The tickets were $200 each. We show up at 6 a.m. and we got $35 tickets for all 5 of us. And it was a bit of an experience. At 6 a.m, they were both in high school at the time. It was the older two, and I mean, how often do you do that in a life? Well, for us, it was one time, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's kind of fun. We showed up at 6 p.m. This is a lot past the 10 a.m. opening, and asked if they had rush tickets, and we got 5 tickets, $35 each. Now, we weren't together
Hmm.
because that would have been a little bit too much to ask, but still, this was fantastic. The show's wonderful. It follows the Marcos family in the Philippines, their rise
Okay.
and their fall. But there's a song in there, and if we if you look up the like songs in Here Lies Love, they'll talk about, let me get you there's one song where they start to talk about, I'll take, the politician, I will take care of you as you move along. The problem is the songs that are on the Broadway version and the songs that are in the earlier version that have the soundtrack aren't always the same. So I'm telling you a song that might be tough to find
We
online
can
at
we
the
can find
moment.
it. Well, you're gonna have
Yeah.
to find it, not me.
Well, the song is "You Will Be Taken Care Of" is the title.
Okay.
That which is, that's kind of a tough. I don't know. There aren't that many songs that probably have a better title. The problem, the version that I have downloaded that I'm looking at right now on my phone, that's not on there. That was the
Hmm.
2013 version. So hopefully, I don't think they have a more updated version. Hopefully, a new, the Broadway cast will record this again. Here Lies Love deluxe album. Hey, there it is. Okay. You could listen in 2010. I guess that was in
That's
2010.
wild that they're different. I always assumed that I assumed you would get different like singers or maybe sort of different sounds styles. I wouldn't expect to like just have whole songs cut out.
Yeah, they actually do a lot of it as
Yeah.
they before they get to Broadway. They'll add songs, they'll cut songs. Sometimes the songs are great, it just doesn't help with the flow or it adds
Hmm.
on. I think a famous one that I heard that I'm not 100% is true, but a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum. If you've heard of
Hmm.
that show, it's a Sondheim show. It's supposed to be funny. Nobody was laughing at it. They were, so they added a song called Comedy Tonight to be the opening number to kind of tell the audience this is you're about to see a comedy, and
Hmm.
it completely changed the reactions people had to the show. So
That's interesting.
yeah, but Here Lies Love is a good show. There's a lot of touching on politicians promising to take
Hmm.
care of people in there, so would recommend that next time you find yourself in Broadway, Jadrian, or in Times Square.
You did a better job coming up with a topic than I did. That was I this is gonna be one of those moments where we say maybe a listener has a better
Hey,
one for
chime in.
us. Please comment and let us know.
Yeah, I like the comments.
I
We got a comment I completely disagreed with this weekend, and I like it. The person was
Yeah.
respectful, and I still think, if you're listening now, I still think you're wrong, but it's okay. I appreciate a good friendly discussion online. Please leave a
Yeah.
comment.
So I'll say the closest I can come to it. So I mentioned the Financial Diaries book earlier. I think it's a
Yeah.
great book. Jonathan Murdoch it was really, really good. Pop culture wise, have you I don't know if we talked about this before. Have you watched Adam Conover's The G Word? It's on
No.
Netflix. So did you ever watch his Adam Ruins Everything stuff? You've seen episodes.
Only the econ ones that y'all posted from time to
Yeah.
time. So
Yeah, they're good. Those are really good. So he came out with a new series called The G Word. The G Word is government.
hmm.
It's I want to say it's 6 or 7 episodes total. It's in a similar style as Adam Ruins Everything, but basically it is a sort of a documentary version of a Michael Lewis book. Have you heard of the Fifth Risk? Fifth What? Now,
I've heard of it. I haven't read. I
it's
haven't.
it's something like that, right? It's the fifth. He has some sort of new. Look how it says how much we're prepared for this. It's called The Fifth Risk. So the book is about essentially. It was about the Department of Energy, the Department of Agriculture, Department of Congress. Like, what sort of problems do those agencies have that would then create like future problems later, right? So like if the USDA goes down, what does that mean for like food in America, sort of thing. So it's based similarly to that. The episodes of the G Word, each one has a different topic. So the first one's food, then weather, then money, the future, disease, and then like political change is sort of the end part. But I think he does a really good job. So I will say it's pro government in the sense that he sort of talks about ways that you don't realize the government is involved in your life. So I'll give you the weather example because I think the weather one's super fascinating. I think a lot of us use the Weather Channel, AccuWeather. Those are private companies, but they actually get their weather models from the National Weather Service.
Okay, yeah.
And so they're taking government produced things and then repackaging it. And so AccuWeather sells like a premium version of basically National Weather Service things. And so it talks about this idea of like sort of the congressional issues of like the National Weather Service can't make their own weather app. They're not allowed to. But this private company is selling government data. Like it's sort of an interesting, like, how is the government involved without you realizing it? But they also talk about, where does the government kind of screw up in all of these things as well? So I think he is not, I'm going to say he's not 50-50. He is definitely kind of more on the pro-government side, but more in the sense of like, you need to recognize like the government's more involved in everything that you do without realizing it. So that's going to be mine. It's not, I think it goes back to what you said, right? There's a lot more trust in letting people do what they want to do rather than just, telling people how to do things.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you to everybody who stuck with us to the end today. We have Economics Happy Hour stickers available.
Mm-hmm.
Simply leave a comment, preferably a positive one, and then send us a screenshot to economicshappyhour@gmail.com, or just look up either of us and send us the screenshot, and we will be happy to mail you several stickers for your laptops or water bottles or whatever you would like.
The more of these stickers we give away, that means that people are actually listening and doing what we tell them. We can order more stuff, and I've got more ideas for our stuff, but we need to give away these stickers. So please leave comments so that we can then order more merch, and because I really want to order the next batch of stuff that I'll tell Matt. You will not get to hear. I'll tell Matt after we log off. But I have more interesting things in mind. So please leave comments so we can get rid of these stickers and get you other things.
So sounds good. Well, how was the beer? Was good, Jadrian?
Oh, it's almost gone. I actually liked this way better than the first time I drank it. So this is a nice change.
That's good. Yeah, mine was good too. Well, thanks to everybody for listening. And Jadrian, until next time, cheers.
Cheers.